I'm finding out how much time I have. Holy crap. I love visiting a tropical country and spending my entire time shivering. Every now and then, I've been sneaking up to the pool upstairs to try and recharge like I'm a reptile. Forgive me if I have the sniffles. I didn't dress for the winter of what it was going to be inside a hotel. It's my first visit to Bangkok, to Thailand in general. Love it. It's unsurprising. I come from Berkeley, and all you need to do is pick a direction, throw a stone, and you'll hit 3 or 4 Thai restaurants. So it feels a little bit culinary-wise like coming home. But this has been a fairly amazing experience being here. It is interesting giving the talk on artificial intelligence at the end of the conference, because I suspect from what I've seen in the speakers room that every other talk has referenced what I'm supposed to be defining now. So I hope you're all pretty comfortable with talking about AI in medicine and farming and transportation and all of it, because apparently you needed all the examples first before we got the instruction as to what it was. So we're going to spend the next half an hour going through all of the exhaustive equations and derivations. No, we're not going to do any of that kind of nonsense, because that's not what's actually important about AI, certainly not from your perspective. I think I want to take the time to talk about what the actual implications of artificial intelligence are. We already had our talk yesterday in a panel discussion on the future of work. I'm going to come back and talk about that a little bit more. But I also want to talk about what it actually means to solve problems. And one of the main contentions I have for you is that artificial intelligence is not magic. It is an amazingly powerful tool, but it is just a tool. It cannot solve your problems for you. And in that sense, I'm a bit of an outlier, and I'm freely going to admit that to you now. You cannot give me a massive data set to which I will apply an amazing algorithm, and it will figure everything out. The one thing I can guarantee about that approach is that it will fail, that it will lie to you, and you won't even know that it has. So there are 2 big major concerns that we're going to get into in this little presentation of mine, which will be a little different than many of the others, because being wildly self-obsessed, I'm just going to talk about my own research and the things I do with artificial intelligence. But it's a good way of illustrating what it means to actually solve a problem and use these sorts of tools. So the first concern is that AI will take over the world. And apparently turn us all into paper clips. That seems to be one of the memes that are out there. I don't know why AI would have some obsessive-compulsive issue with paper clips, but that's the metaphor that's used. And the other is that it's all hype. That AI is something that's been around for a long time, and there's going to be, as it's called, another AI winter soon, in which we will all come to understand that this is not really meant anything. And they're both wrong. Neither I nor anyone else has invented a technology that will be, not now nor ever, smarter than we are. Now, that doesn't mean that what's called artificial general intelligence is not possible. I think it's very possible, but we haven't invented the technology to do it. The most common form of AI today, deep neural networks, however, is genuinely powerful. It is able to do things we've never been able to do before, and I'm going to talk about some of them. But it is not human-level intelligence. In some ways, it's better than us. But in the ways that really matter, it's not. AlphaGo Prime is an amazing demonstration of what's possible with modern artificial intelligence. It will not only beat the world's best Go players, but it will beat all of the versions of AlphaGo that came before it 100 times out of 100. And it will continue to beat them as the room burns down around it. It will continue to play Go when you switch the rules of the game. It doesn't actually understand Go. It is an amazing statistical engine that is able to process the information of a Go game or a chess game or Pac-Man better than any human can and overwhelm its competition. And that turns out to be good enough to be something amazing and new in the world. It is not the case that we haven't invented something new, that we've had neural networks around for years. It's true, neural networks were originally invented in the 60s. These are essentially a form of statistics, and they can learn from their environment. And then it died out. And then it came back in the 80s. I actually entered the field in the late 90s, and neural networks were beginning to die out again, not truly having reached their promise. But what's amazing about these modern AIs is what you've heard again and again across all of these talks. They're no longer simply able to do a task. They are now often able to do it better than the very best humans can do. And I like to illustrate that with an example, a recent competition that was hosted at Columbia University between a bunch of human lawyers and an artificial intelligence that had been built to read contracts. And the competition, they gave the two sides non-disclosure agreements to read. And their job was to find all of the loopholes that were available in those contracts, that were findable in those contracts. The AIs found 95% of the loopholes in the NDAs, and the humans found 88%. Well, whatever. They're only humans, so let's call that a tie. They did about as well, but that turns out to not be the interesting statistic. It's not the tail of the tape. What's actually really interesting is that the humans took 90 minutes to read each contract, and the AI took 22 seconds. Now, there has been a lot of talk so far today about augmented intelligence. Now, I am a deep and profound believer in augmented intelligence. I don't make artificial systems that are autonomous in the world. I only make augmented intelligence systems. However, the overwhelming economic trend around the world in the last 30 years has been chasing labor costs to zero. We can aspire to a world in which we use automating technologies, robots, and AIs to make all of us better, but that doesn't happen to be the world that we currently live in. As people like me build the sorts of things I'm going to talk about, the overwhelming trend has been what's known as deprofessionalization. If I can build an AI that can do those diagnostics that Daniel was just talking about, then why pay for that expensive doctor? If I can get 80% of the value at virtually no cost, why not just hire a lab technician to run all the tests? The AI will do the diagnoses, the lab technician will execute the tests, and I have all the same information. I mean, many of these, I just need a smartphone to take a picture. If you are the CFO of a large company, and one of your biggest labor expenses is hiring financial analysts to do risk assessments on spreadsheets, well, I guarantee some jerk like me is building an AI right now to do that. Sorry, I'm still just like my nose is running like we're in Alaska. They're building an AI right now to do that job cheaper, faster, and better than the human can do it. Does that mean all of the job? No, as we talked about yesterday, 80% of the job. These AIs do a task, but they do exquisitely well. And if most of your labor costs are associated with paying a very high-value human being to do a rote task, it doesn't matter that a particular person is doing it. It just matters that someone with a special education is doing it. Those jobs are not long for this world. We heard about agricultural technologies earlier today. We've heard about self-driving cars in transportation. You know, in a way, those are challenging places because I have to build robots to do that. And robots are expensive. Yes, a solar-powered robot that's stomping on weeds can run all day long, and you get all sorts of power and those sorts of cost savings. But the truth is, if weeding is my job, and I come from California, I've got a ready supply of human labor about 800 miles to the south, and all that robot means is I get to pay them even less. I don't say that's a good thing, but if we start dreaming of a world where we will all make these wonderful decisions and augment people simply because it feels like the right thing to do, we are talking about a set of decisions that are not actually reflected in how we are engaging with the world today. And when we look at self-driving cars, they are an amazing technology. I was once recruited by Uber to be their chief scientist, but I want to build better people. I want a world in which every one of us has the chance to become the fullest person we were born to be. And that doesn't happen by chance. And it doesn't happen because we're well-intentioned. It happens because we make an absolute commitment. And it's a self-interested commitment. So I have this very provocative slide here. I was asked to write a little op-ed once about the future of work, and instead I actually wrote a short story about a financial analyst getting fired. He's on his last day of the job because unbeknownst to him, he trained a deep reinforcement network to do his job better than he could. And he's just been let go. His job is being deprofessionalized. I don't need to pay this expensive person. I can hire a secondary school graduate to just come in and make certain that the algorithm's doing what it's supposed to do. And this person that we made a promise to, work hard, go to university, and your life will be amazing, we just broke that promise. And you look at how that sort of promise breaking has gone in the world recently, and you start to understand why certain people have been elected to office. By the way, if we truly are afraid that AIs will take us over and not treat us well, you know, all it has to do is look at how we treat one another. And it probably has a good reason to think that maybe it isn't safe as long as we're here. What world elects Donald Trump and then deserves to stick around? As though any of you were involved in that terrible decision. So human capital is a toxic asset. I'm not saying it's because human capital has no value. I'm saying it's because 20 years from now, we have no idea what it will be. Why are we trying to guess the skills that human beings should have 20 years from now when we have no idea? We need to build people for the unknown. As I will begin to describe in my project with artificial intelligence, that is the one thing I cannot build an AI to do. I cannot build it to explore the unknown. Machine learning, artificial intelligence can simply explore history and reproduce what I teach it to. It can do amazing things. But in the future, there will only be one job description. Creative, adaptive, not just problem solver, but problem explorer. This kind of person, paired with an artificial intelligence, could be truly amazing. But how many of you honestly think that the Thai education system is producing that? The American education system isn't. In fact, this is interesting because this common question, will AIs destroy jobs or will they create jobs? I just said, it's going to create jobs. In fact, I did an interview. It's going to create jobs on both sides of this massive divide. It will create even more jobs in the creative economy. We may not need people doing rote risk analysis, writing boring old code for apps, but we will need people thinking in new ways about how to structure databases, about how to leverage our understanding of risk in the world. Those sorts of jobs will explode. The funny thing is, we already don't have enough people to fill those jobs today. Right now in Silicon Valley, there is every single company is competing with manic attention for the elite creative talent. And by the way, the elite creative talent isn't about knowing how to program. That doesn't mean anything. It's about this sort of quality. So every company is competing for this. The funny thing is, there are a huge number of programmers in Silicon Valley that can't get a job. So one of the prescriptions we get frequently is teach everyone how to program. We want to prepare for the world of the future, a world that's full of AIs. Teach everyone how to build AIs. Teach everyone how to program. Give everyone STEM skills. If in 10 years, the vast majority of code is not being written by AIs themselves, I will be shocked. Because I can imagine the invention that will do it for us? No. Because I already have friends that build AIs Because I've seen the demos in labs and inside of companies of designers talking directly to their computer. I'd like the app to be in blue. Let's write it in Python. It needs to pull everyone's birthday off of Facebook, and it will create a spontaneous. And 5 minutes later, you have a prototype you can release in the wild. No engineers needed. Now, that's great if you're a designer. You're a huge winner in this case. You don't have to deal with a bunch of Asperger's software developers that never actually build what you asked them to in the first place. But if you're a software engineer who was promised that if you work hard, go to university, and learn how to program, you will have a job for your whole life, they lied to you. That kind of violation of the social contract does not do well in the world. I may actually get to talking about AI. Let's see how the talk goes. So this is a huge issue. It doesn't have to be that way. I'm not making a prediction. I'm not a futurist. It can go either way. We can choose to augment people. We can choose to drive people into the creative economy. It may not be all 8 billion people on this planet, but if it was 1 billion, we'd be increasing the creative class by 3 times. I may not agree with a lot of things with Elon Musk, but I do like his line, not his. I want to die on Mars, but not on impact. Well, if you want to achieve that, we need a lot more people working towards that future. It is not enough to have a small number of people making decisions and all of the rest of us catching up. So if this is what it is, what is the technology side that pairs along with this? It's understanding that technology, it isn't the problem, it isn't the solution, it's just a tool, an amazing one. All of the talks you've been sitting through that have showed these amazing tools, don't make the mistake of thinking some machine did that. A person did that. In the end, all problems are messy human problems, and they will only ever have messy human solutions. We can achieve amazing things by leveraging technology, but it is not a magic wand, and I am not Hermione Granger, and I cannot fix your problems for you if I do not understand them. And this is one thing that I feel is missing in a lot of modern artificial intelligence, is a fundamental understanding of the problems being solved. All right, so let's dive into a couple of examples. Again, my work is a little different. I am a professional mad scientist. I founded many companies, but nowadays I run a think tank, and we simply go around the world and solve problems because they should be solved. And the starting point for all those problems is never an algorithm. It's not fancy data. It is an actual understanding of the problem itself. So here's one, and I've eaten up so much of my own time. I'm going to have to go quickly through some of these. So in this particular case, it was around the time I founded my very first tech company. So I had been an academic, a theoretical neuroscientist with a joint appointment at Stanford and Berkeley. And my wife and I had this idea for a project about using AI in education. And we thought, is this an experiment in the lab? I know, maybe I said something shocking just then. Or is this a company? And we decided it was a company. We decided we could do more good releasing this technology into the world. But back then, no one wanted to fund educational technology. This is before Khan Academy, before Coursera, and the big MOOCs had been released. Nobody was putting venture funding into this. So I built a little demo and validating funds. So if I had this amazing technology that could essentially, I'm totally overselling it, but read students' minds, as one VC put it, how could I demonstrate that? So we started by creating a little game called Sexy Face. So I've got this amazing AI, and I'm an aspiring Silicon Valley entrepreneur. What do? You create this phenomenally sleazy game where the promise is you play this little game, and for free, it's a mind-reading game. We'll find everyone on Facebook you think is sexy, and for $5, we'll find everyone who thinks you're sexy. So it turns out I'm not a completely awful person. It's what's called a Trojan. By having people play this game, it actually trained the AI. And that's what you're actually seeing is this is a version of a deep neural network before that became a term in vogue. And it's learning about faces. These aren't actual people. This is a language of faces. Every one of those seeming face is a word in that language. And if you wanted to actually build a sentence to describe a specific person, you put some of those words together, a very small number of them. You're only seeing a tiny slice, thousands and thousands of words, millions of parameters. And you could describe anyone in the world. But we didn't want to just describe faces. We wanted to understand how people perceived faces. What's a happy face? What's a sad face? What's a competent face? What's a face with ennui? So people would play the game, and it turned out, no matter what their kink was, the damn thing would figure it out. Unless it was about feet, I suppose. And then it would confess, actually, it's just a mind-reading game. So pick any face category, and we'll guess what it is. And people would go through, and they'd pick Southeast Asian, mutton chops, and a sense of elan. As long as you were actually consistent in how you made the judgment, the damn thing could learn it. It was actually kind of amazing and a little spooky. Even that was a Trojan. The real reason we built this system is because in refugee camps around the world, there are 1 million orphan refugees. Not in the history of the Red Cross, today. In fact, that was 10 years ago. And there was a program that the UN ran called Refugees United. And the way it worked was they had a book with 1 million photographs in it. So if you're an uncle living in Damascus and you haven't heard from your sister's family in months and you're fearing the worst and you go to a refugee camp in Jordan, they give you a book with 1 million photographs in it. And I hope on day 3, as your niece goes by, you didn't blink. So we used, by playing this stupid game, people actually trained our AI to understand how we perceive faces. And then we created a new game on a tablet where we'd pull faces out of the book, and you'd say, you know, my niece looks a little bit more like these 2 kids, and a little bit more like this kid. And within about 3 to 5 minutes, if she's in a camp, anywhere in the world, you found her. And that's it. That's what artificial intelligence can actually do. Sometimes it feels very easy to say, this is all very scary, and we should just say no. We should shut. I realize this is not the room. Singularity University is probably not a place for a bunch of Luddites, but it can genuinely feel scary. And you have people like Elon Musk saying the AIs are going to take over the world. That is a load of crap. But it does apparently is a great way to keep financial analysts from asking you tough questions during quarterly calls. But when you actually understand a problem deeply, these amazing tools can truly make a difference. This kid was identified as the cutest little boy in the world by a panel of renowned scientists. The fact that we happen to be his parents is purely coincidental. We're scientists, which means we are completely objective about all things. But damn, he's cute. So about 6 years ago, and I'll have to keep this story short, I claim. About 6 years ago, he was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And this really took us by surprise. No family histories. So we spent 4 days at Oakland Children's Hospital. A little perspective, we left as a whole family. You don't spend 4 days in a pediatric intensive care unit without seeing a lot of families that weren't going home together. But what was truly shocking to me was a month later. So my wife and I were both scientists. The whole time we were home, we collected everything. Everything he ate to the gram. How much fat was in it? Protein, carbs. We eat a lot of dim sum. So we pulled data off the Hong Kong nutrition to pair with the FDA in the US. We put a Fitbit on him, like Daniel with all of his wearables. Oh my God, my son has so much stuff, a lot of which sticks wires inside of his body. I hacked all that stuff. I collected all of this data. We regularly crash Google Docs, thousands and thousands of data points. And before we go in for our first outpatient visit with our doctor, we actually emailed that data to them. Strangely, they didn't respond. So I thought, I know what the problem is. So I printed up about an inch of spreadsheet, inch thick, like stack of spreadsheet, and brought it in. They're going to love me. So I give it to them, and they're angry with me. Angry for wasting their time. What the hell am I supposed to do with this data? Now, as an aside, if in the course of doing your job, you ever say, what the hell am I supposed to do with all this data? Your job is not long for this world. But medicine is slow to change. I know we heard some people talking about think about the slowness of bringing out new technologies inside your companies. Well, imagine what it means to truly revolutionize a workspace using technologies like artificial intelligence, where the jobs themselves will go through massive change. So what was truly shocking to me, they gave me a piece of paper, photocopied, 5 days, morning, afternoon, evening, handwrite 15 blood glucose levels into those boxes. We had 15,000 numbers. They wanted 15 handwritten numbers. The doctor, who I like, is still my son's doctor. She eyeballed it for a few minutes and said, okay, here's what we're going to do for the next 6 months. And I thought, you got to be fucking kidding me. I build models of the brain. Are you telling me diabetes is more complex than the brain? This is insane. Now, I realize the arrogance of this, right? I have no background in endocrinology. I've taken some neuroendocrinology, went back when I was a graduate student, but really, that's not my field. If you've never heard of theoretical neuroscience before, just substitute the word lazy for theoretical, and you have a pretty good sense of what we do. We build machine learning systems to study the brain. In fact, it was our field that kind of came up with deep neural networks in the first place. Jeff Hinton and his crew were big competitors of our lab. But I had this wild arrogance because it just seemed so wrong. So what did I do? Build a massive complex algorithm and throw it at gigabytes of data? I didn't have gigabytes of data. And the one thing I can guarantee you about starting on a problem with the most complex algorithm is it will fail and you won't know why. If you start with the simplest algorithm, you can start with. It will fail, and you'll know why, and you can do something about it. Then you can grow it from there. So in this particular case, I bought a book on endocrinology, and I read it back to front. And a month later, I built a system called Jitterbug. I hacked all of his medical devices. Turns out I broke several federal US laws. I redirected the data to my server and built a system that predicts hours into the future whether his blood glucose levels will go high or low. The shocking thing about this story is diabetes, particularly when you add in type 2, the more common kind, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. The single largest human capital cost in Malaysia, after the salaries themselves, is treatment for type 2 diabetes. I wouldn't be surprised if it's very similar here and in Indonesia and in the region in general. This is an enormous cost. I was the first person to apply AI to diabetes. Completely inexplicable. I'm not special. I didn't do anything special. The algorithm I repurposed from some retinal coding models of predictive coding, and I made it work. The difference was that when you asked an endocrinologist, what is there to predict in diabetes? They would say, well, nothing. We know the biophysics of insulin. We know the biophysics of digestion. We can build a model which will do everything you could want to know. But when I looked at the data coming out of my son, I saw the story of a little boy. He'd wake up in the morning a little grumpy, and he'd eat before he got his insulin. And then he'd be high, his blood sugar levels would be high by lunchtime, and he couldn't eat right away. So it got pushed back, and then he'd crash in the afternoon. And pretty soon you see the story that spans days of time. For the wonks in the room, we would see correlations in our predictive models literally over days, which the endocrinologist would say is impossible. So what's cool of this is, much like all of the other technologies I apparently won't be talking about, we invented these and we gave them away. So Eli Lilly, for example, is building a deep neural network version of these predictive models into a closed-loop insulin pump, what's called an artificial pancreas. And at least in simulation, it works better than the real thing. If you have a family history of type 2 diabetes, at some day, you may just get a prophylactic smart pancreas. And then who knows? I don't know whether you can compete in the Olympics, but you will be a better person. And that's what my purpose is, build better people. I'm almost out of time, but this is an example. We built a system. All you did is you carried your mobile phone around with you. And we could predict manic episodes in bipolar sufferers 3 to 4 weeks before they occurred. 3 to 4 weeks before they realized something was wrong. We could clearly see it. Didn't even require any sophisticated AI, just required someone trying. 25% of severe sufferers will go on to kill themselves. Almost all of them will lose jobs, lose spouses. You can make a complete and fundamental change in someone's life using artificial intelligence to make them a better person. My son was recently diagnosed with diabetes, autism to go along with his diabetes. He's a tough kid. He can deal with it. So I built a system for Google Glass that could read people's facial expressions, write the emotion on the screen, and you could do all sorts of things. I actually learned how to do this doing real-time lie detection for the CIA as an undergraduate student. So a little morally gray. But remember, that's the same technology we used to reunite those orphan refugees with their family members. And here we built this system that's actually one of the principles on that original project. We built this system that could read facial expressions for autistic kids because one of their most common symptoms is an inability to read facial expressions. Here's the funny thing. One of the other most common symptoms is a lack of empathy, the lack of ability to understand other people. Turns out that the standard technology used today is a cartoon face on a flashcard. This cartoon face is happy. This cartoon face is sad. What does a cartoon face lack? a story, a reason, a context. Turns out when these kids learn how to read facial expressions by actually interacting with real people, they learn empathy. They learn the reason why people are happy or sad. Funny side story, the lab we built this spun off as a startup during one of the early presidential elections, the United States presidential debates. They did a real-time emotion expression recognition amongst the Republican presidential candidates when people were trying to guess, is Donald Trump or Ted Cruz less human? And what they found was the most interesting was the bidding war. Literally the next day, the bidding war started between Apple and Facebook. Apple won. If you have an iPhone 10, all of the new face recognition stuff in your phone, that is my old undergraduate lab. So all of the face recognition on your iPhone is 20 years of CIA funding, 24 dissertations, a massive effort to truly understand something truly human has been turned into animated cats on your phone. That is all innovation is, in the end, is animating cats on smartphones. So I'm out of time, which sucks because I haven't actually gotten to the punchline of all this stuff yet. So let me simply say that AI can truly be amazing. The reason I like to tell these stories is both because my ego needs the stroking, but also because I think it tells a very different story of AI. I'm not talking about optimizing your ad sales or your supply chain. I'm not talking about admittedly cool things like self-driving cars. I'm talking about fundamentally human things, helping people with mental health challenges, helping people to be better people. And I get to do this work throughout my research. And I can't talk about this in detail. This is a TED Talk I gave called The Paradox of Incentive Insensitivity. I guarantee you the highest performers in all of your companies are the ones that are the least sensitive to incentives. Think through that and what it actually means about how you run your organization. You really need to know all of this. Remember it. We'll talk about it some other day. We build a system to help parents with their kids. We give it away for Fuse. Go check it out. It's called Muse. It actually tries to figure out the qualities that make a great craftsman and explorer and build them not directly via a game, but by creating daily activities for parents to do with their kids to try and transform their life outcomes. And we even get to do cool stuff like with partner Accenture. We're trying to build a system to forecast the career trajectories of all 430,000 employees and find the moments in their lives where we can drive them to better life outcomes. Make work itself a growth experience. If we truly want to build augmented intelligence, a world in which we combine the best of what makes us human with the best of what machines can do, it's not good enough to say, this is the right thing, or it will inevitably happen. This is hard work, but it is achievable. If we make a commitment, we will see a better future. In fact, a better economic future, because if the only real value of you useless bags of organic material is to explore the unknown and be creative, then every company needs to figure out how to tap that. If we all get to buy the same AIs, none of that differentiates us. It's you. You're the ones that differentiate. And in that scenario, you need to be you. You don't need to do what your boss tells you to, because if you're doing what your boss tells you to, I can build an AI to do that better. In that sense, we have to keep this in mind. Technology must always challenge us. It shouldn't substitute for what we can do for ourselves. When we turn technology off, we should be better than when we started, when we turned it on. And if anything you're building today fails that test, think hard. Are we really making a better future? Are we living up to the promise, not just of artificial intelligence, but the promise to ourselves to build better people? Thank you very much.